Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Jesse Simonton. I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday of Georgia Week. This time a year ago, Jeremy Pruitt was getting choked up at a press conference because his team had fought the way that he wanted them to fight. The question is, what kind of fight are they going to have Saturday against what he says is a better Georgia team? And I think we would all agree that this is a better Georgia team than a year ago.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. You know, the offense, it's still obviously predicated on downhill running the ball, giant offense. I mean, they have, 4 F-150s that lining up on the offensive line. But it's a veteran quarterback, and defensively, I thought some of Pruitt's comments on Monday were semi-interesting, just kind of comparing what he does versus what Kirby does, because personnel, Georgia's just a deeper and bigger football team. So they run more traditional 3-4. Now with kind of some new flavor with Dan Lanning, a defensive coordinator, that they're pressuring more. They have a young front seven, but it's got some talent.
Are they the most talented front? I mean, I guess Auburn's the most talented front seven in the league.
I think so.
I would say Auburn definitely has the best front four. When you include linebackers, Georgia is probably that's when they leapfrog the Tigers.
You think they're 1 and 2 though? Those two teams. I mean,
yes.
I think we put Auburn and Georgia's front seven ahead of
having to play some young.
Yeah,
ahead of
Alabama
injuries.
right? Dylan Moses out.
To me, the thing that jumps out, Rob, about Georgia's front seven is just how aggressive and how forward they play. I mean, they play on your side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, Coach Pruitt talked about the increased number of TFLs and sacks that they have. I mean, they're much more, to me, they come across much more of an attacking defense this year than we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it just kind of speaks to the confidence they have in the back end, and I don't know how, Ian Book can throw it a little bit. I mean, Notre Dame, I don't know how much speed they have on the perimeter, but I mean, I think if you're going to beat Georgia, I mean, it's kind of, not rocket science. You're going to have to make some plays down the field in the passing game. I mean, you have to be able to, beat one-on-one coverage on the perimeter. You have to block them up front, which I don't know that anything I just said there is Tennessee's strength.
Yeah, and Notre Dame, I mean, Georgia's one of 2 teams in the country. Cole Kubiak, I think, tweeted this out the other day. Georgia and Iowa are the only 2 teams in the country that haven't allowed a rushing touchdown. And the Irish just gave up on.
They didn't even try.
That game. I mean,
they didn't even. I mean, first and goal at the 2 and didn't even try. We're going to throw it 4 straight times.
4 straight passes, and Georgia is beat up a little bit at cornerback. But as Jeremy said, I mean, that's why they have depth, and that's why they are where they are in relation to kind of his rebuild, going on here.
Well, and again, everybody wants to compare rebuilds, and this is not. I'm not defending Jeremy Pruitt for being 1 and 3 because this team and this program has no business being 1 and 3 right now. I will say this: it's unfair comparison of Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart because of what Kirby Smart inherited. It's a football team that had won 10 games the previous 2 years and decided.
It's apples and oranges.
It's decided Mark Richt they had enough and they were moving on. So
they were,
and it was a defense that already had his system in, too.
Yes.
Which I don't think a lot of people really examine that. But when he came in, a lot of the terminology was the same. Style of play was the same. So he inherited a much better situation. There's nobody can debate that or really deny that in any way, shape, or form. But let's get to this game a little bit from the standpoint of the quarterback matchup. I don't think any of us or the quarterback decisions for Tennessee. I don't think anybody was surprised Jeremy Pruitt said nothing on Monday, and he's going to play the quarterback situation close to his vest. Doesn't want to give anything away. If you're Jeremy Pruitt, what are you doing this week?
If you still think that the floor of your team, which I would agree with, is higher with JG than just completely going with one or both freshmen, then I would go into the game plan with the expectation of playing 2 guys, being JG and Maurer, and having a package, but not just like a run-only package, but having a real scripted package for Maurer to come in the game in not garbage time, not whatever, but a time that actually mattered.
Yeah, I mean,
are you starting Jared?
I don't know. I mean, you can make a case for either way, but I know that in talking to some people, just the amount of mistakes that Brian made, and that are to be expected. Against Florida, I think it's really troublesome, especially this week against Georgia. I guess my biggest thing, we talked about this during the locker room Sunday night, is you know, you're going to throw out. If I'm Jeremy Pruitt, I'm going to put out there whoever gives me the best chance to win. And if that's JG because, you know, he understands and makes less mistakes, then it's JG. But if it's a guy like Brian Maurer because the team is, you know, really, you know, vested in him and you know, he's really kind of got a lot of kids gravitating towards him, I'm not worried about, you know, what looks good, what don't look good. I mean, rolling JG out is going to be the unpopular pick amongst fans. So, I mean, but if you feel like it makes him the best chance to win, I'd say I roll out there Saturday because you got to win games. You got to find a way to compete.
Tennessee's not winning this game anyway. I mean, I'd start JG.
I play them both.
On a short leash. First time he throws a pick. First time he stares a guy down.
First time he
gets a delay game.
First time he throws a swing pass.
Just, I mean, short leash. I mean, because I just don't. I mean, I don't see it. I mean,
I'm honestly surprised he's here. I you know, to me,
but he hadn't lost his job. I mean, he has. I mean, look, he got taken out of the game to start the second half, and they went back to him. I think to your point, had he been sent to the showers at the half, and it would have been Maurer and Shrout the rest of the way, I think his approach would have been different. Because there's probably some in his camp going, see, you tried. I'm the best you got. Okay, I got to play better, but I'm the best you got. That's why you went back to me.
Well, and
where's he going to go right now? What's he going to? I mean, just sit at home and shut it down?
Well,
I don't think he's going to do that.
Well, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that's the nature of all kids now. Is, you know, when they start to see the writing on the wall, they dip out. And, you know, how can you not say that you've seen some writing on the wall from, you know, those 3 series in Gainesville?
But I would say what's different in his case and what we see around the country is he's already redshirted and he's already graduated. So he's not buying himself a year by leaving last week.
Right, and it's not. I mean, Quentin Dormady. I see your point. You're right. That is the nature of kids, but he hasn't lost his job. He may very well. I mean, we're sitting here. You said start him. You know, Jesse, Austin. You said you'd start JG. You said Rob, that you would start JG. That's probably the direction I would go. So he quote hadn't lost. It's not like Quentin Dormady got taken out of the game for sliding in a win in week 3 or whenever he did and lost his job because Butch got mad and yanked him out, and then he was done at that point, you know, because I think that scenario is a little bit different. I think had JG not gone back in the game, then I think the mindset and the approach his approach would be a different feeling right now.
And I will say, I mean, I wrote the piece during we talked about it a little bit in the mailbag pod on Friday, but it's notable that Maurer kind of does have the backing of his teammates, but from the very, very, very small sample size we've seen from him and Shrout, I am of the opinion that if Tennessee decides to go full young quarterback, I think they should play both those kids.
Maurer and Shrout.
Yeah, I do not. I don't think one. I don't. Again, it's noteworthy.
There's not enough separation.
It's noteworthy that Maurer has the belief. It's noteworthy that Maurer has the belief of his teammates, and I do think that counts for something. But in terms of just because there's a real chance that Shrout's not here next year either, and you could be looking at one scholarship guy coming back with the way this is played out.
How big of a deal?
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Austin, how big? You mentioned this, and Jesse, you followed up with it. Is the backing, you know, the locker room deal? Do you feel like that there's a bit of a divide that's growing there, or is this just, hey, they're 1-3, quarterback's not played well, quarterback gets too much credit, quarterback gets too much blame, or do you think there's some guys who starting to wonder a little bit about JG internally?
Well, I mean, I think it's fairly well known that, you know, Juwan Jennings has never been a big Jarrett guy. He wasn't, you know, when Quentin was here, even when Quentin had his struggles, he stayed kind of loyal to him.
Yeah, but he may be the lone. He may be the outlier on the other side now. He's at his best. I mean,
maybe. You know, I think Juwan.
I think there's other guys more frustrated than
Juwan. No. I'm going there. That's why I'm starting with Juwan. Everybody knows his history with Jarrett, and I think Juwan. This is his last rodeo. It's not like he can go somewhere else, so he's going to make the best of it with whatever he can. And I think that's why you've seen him be more of a, you know, just. I mean, he's always been a leader, but more so this year maybe than ever before. But yeah, I mean, Callaway, I thought it was notable Friday night. You know, I mean, he goes to a high school game to watch Caden Martin play, T. Martin's son at Catholic. Who's his shadow? Brian Maurer. I mean, I think that, you know, that there is some, I won't say divide, because I don't think that's the right word. But I do think that there is some, you know, definitely some kind of leaning to one way or the other.
It's been interesting. I mean, Callaway has made a couple of comments that made you
Which is out of character for him.
Kind of wonder a little bit, Jesse. I think the one comment was something about, Jerry getting himself right with all that he's going through and everything else. Which
that was after Georgia State.
Which was a little pause for like, wait a minute, is there something else going on we don't know about here? It was a bit of an unusual comment.
And then he doubled down post Florida and basically said, Jarrett getting benched was, a wake up call type of deal.
Yeah.
He didn't use that phrase, but he,
intimated. The sentiment was the same.
Yeah, intimated as much. There's obviously multiple dynamics going on in this locker room right now. When you talk about guys leaving, I noted it in my 10 things piece during the bye week on Friday. Jeremy did a great job a year ago at getting this entire roster to buy in initially because no one knew, and it wasn't your guys versus my guys, and it was a clean slate. And he got that. Tennessee had very minimal attrition, but now some hope is lost, and it's a tough challenge for every coach that comes into a new job, but particularly a first-time head coach when you now have accumulated some losses, and those guys who bought in and they worked super hard during the off season and they put in all that effort, and they're still not playing, but you're still not winning. There's a fine line there of how you kind of keep some of those guys engaged, and that's just the reality of human nature, and that's the reality of dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids.
Well, it's a great point in the topic. I'll jump off on that a little bit and go down this road, Rob. I hadn't really thought about this till Jesse started talking about it. We're seeing around the country second-year coaches have some struggles. Okay, we talked about Kirby Smart and the good situation he inherited there, but you're seeing some second-year coaches have a rough go of it, okay? So, Scott Frost in Nebraska. I know they played Ohio State. Ohio State's really good, but they also lost to Colorado. Second-year Scott Frost has not been great at Nebraska. Even though they were preseason ranked, it's not gone particularly well there. We've seen what's happened at Florida State with Willie Taggart in year 2. Some would say, well, it's Willie Taggart. He was bad in year 1. But they haven't made really any improvement in year 2. Jeremy Pruitt's 1-3, which nobody saw coming in year 2. What is it? Why is it harder for second-year coaches, or is it harder?
I think it's all relative. I don't think it has. I think it's all just about your situation. I don't think second year is a common denominator. Not when you look back. You can easily pluck out guys who have had big success in year 2, like Kirby, or go back to Nick.
Well, yeah, the unfortunate thing is...
I think it's all about your roster.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is
about your talent level.
Yeah, and this is... We will see if Jeremy can buck this trend. But in the SEC specifically, if you don't get to Atlanta in your second year, then the writing is kind of on the wall.
Man, I just think I'd like to see the NFL draft picks off those teams that made Atlanta in your team.
I understand, and that's why it just shows you. It's.
Well, they were never making it to Atlanta in year 2 here.
I understand, but my point is that's the uphill battle that some of these second-year coaches are fighting versus if you look at the past.
Well,
it boils down to whether a program or school is going to be patient.
Yeah.
If you got a team like Tennessee, Florida State, Nebraska, what do all three of those teams have in common? They were left with a whole lot of nothing. And then the thing, either Jesse or Brent, one of you two brought this up, and it makes sense. That early signing period, that they were the first guinea pig coaches that basically got hired and had 10 days to kind of fill out a class.
Yep.
How is that affecting their teams in year 2? Because if they didn't have a whole lot on the roster to begin with, you probably weren't going to bring in a lot of great guys in that first class having 10 days. And it makes some sense. I'm not saying that that's the whole reason Tennessee's 1-3 and lost. Losing to Georgia State's inexcusable. But when you look at all three of those programs that you just talked about, maybe have a little impact. Because all of a sudden you got half of a class that was kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, how many sophomores on this team who are true sophomores are making a real impact right now that were in that class that Pruitt threw together to Hurley? Garland.
Well, it's Bryce, it's Delonte, it's Garland. They're playing a lot of those kids. Greg Emerson's playing a lot.
25.
Trayvon,
yeah.
Yeah,
Tillman, again, Tillman was a late ad. He had nothing.
Right. Some of those guys there, but it's it's one of those things where it is hard. I mean, you're not going to come in and have the
But are they ready?
Because you haven't had 6 weeks to go recruit them.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part of
'cause
next
there's
year. Okay, you talked about Shrout leaving. Let's say JG's not back, and it's Brian Maurer and Harrison Bailey. I mean, that's hard on Harrison Bailey. Hey, the pressure's on you, kid. I mean, that's why them.
But that's the world we live in.
It is, but I mean that's why getting in the
Sam Howell, come to North Carolina. Pressure's on you, kid. I mean, hey, you're a freshman.
Yeah, and there lies the other side of the coin for all the Tennessee fans. They're like, they just were a 2-point conversion away from beating the number 1 team in the country, and it ain't like Mac had anything when he got there. And I think that's the biggest.
But the difference is what Jesse was talking about. Year 1, it's easier to sell the hope. I think year 1's easier than year 2. Now year 2 can be easier for some coaches if they inherit a really good roster, as you were mentioned, which I think Kirby Smart is the guy who screws up the curve. Okay, he's the nerd who made 100 on the test when everybody else made a 60. Okay, because of the situation he inherited. I don't want to take anything away from Kirby Smart being a coach, but there could have been a lot of coaches go in there and find success because they inherited a 10-win football team.
He went from 10-win football team, got worse in year 1 to come back to almost win the national title in year 2.
And recruiting had not fallen off under Rick like it had here under Butch. I mean,
there was a talent. There was certainly a talent level.
And as you said, they just moved on from a guy that could take them to 10 wins and just couldn't get over the hump.
They felt like it was going downhill, or he couldn't get them where they needed to go, Jesse, and they made a move, and they got ahead of it, or they tried to be ahead of it. Is what they ended up trying to do.
Yeah, I mean they embraced the fact that they were good to at times really good, but were sitting on a place that could be great. I mean, and
they decided to go all in.
Yeah,
I mean they decided, hey, Clemson's coming. We're not going to get left behind to the east. We're going to try to catch Alabama west of us. Florida's are down a little bit. This is our window. We're going to run with it, and they have done that. They have jumped completely all in terms of their investment into their program, and given Kirby Smart's like an NFL coach who got GM responsibilities as well. I mean he got full control, which is something that was the only way he was going to take the job, and it's obviously paying off for him.
You guys may disagree with me here. I still think it all goes back to the trigger man. What would Georgia's record be? And I know Jacob Eason's a pretty good player, okay? But I think Fromm has just got a certain moxie to him. When you find your guy and you've got him for 3 or 4 years, and you hit on a quarterback, let's take a look at Clemson. I mean, they've hit. I mean, whenever you get that guy you don't hit on, to me that's when you kind of take a step back, and then you've either got to figure it out, or you're going to keep going back, on the escalator down.
Well, the quarterback's the guy that gives you hope. I mean, there's no question. Do I think that Georgia would be in the top 4 nationally if Justin Fields was their quarterback right now? I do.
Fields, yes, but I'm saying the East.
And I think Easton would have. I think Easton would have them in the top 4 or 5.
Okay.
Because I think their defense is that good. Now, had you asked me that a year ago, I mean, there's a reason Jake Fromm won that job as a freshman away from Easton, because he had the moxie, he had all those things. My point is where Georgia is defensively right now, they could have a signal caller. Whereas at Alabama, if you don't have Tua doing it, I'm not sure Alabama's where they're at right now, because defensively they've taken a step back.
And to bring this kind of back to Tennessee in terms of what's been interesting this season in terms of quarterbacks, Tennessee, Garantano, you wonder if Chaney. And again, I mean, JG was effusive in his praise about Jim and this offense and all the the fire emojis and all the answers that he said. But you wonder if Jim thought that he could do what he was able to do with Fromm, with all the checks and how putting so much on the quarterback's plate. If that has been something that, I mean, you're the one that said a week ago at Florida they should have just been looking to the sidelines. They did not do that. Do they do that Saturday? Because clearly, for whatever reason, JG has taken a big step back from where he was a year ago.
Well, I think it's a great question, good point, Rob. I think part of this is the struggle for a coordinator in terms of what you can do and what you can't do is when a guy doesn't take it from the film room, the chalkboard, the practice field to the game field. When you go through everything all week, and Coach Pruitt talked about this on Monday, and Jim talked about it in the preseason, that that Jerry can handle all this stuff. He's done well in the practice field. It hasn't translated to the game. So you keep waiting for it to translate. And I'm not knocking on Tyler Bray, but when you put Tyler Bray in the lineup as a freshman, you knew what limitations you had in terms of what he could handle mentally. It was, hey, let's rely on his arm talent, and it became check with me. And let's play football that way. Whereas I think with Jared, the thought was we might be able to win and have some success because he could get us in the right play all the time. And I don't think that's translated from practice field to game field, which makes it hard.
And I can totally see, we've all been around Jared enough. He's a smart kid. I can totally see him sitting in the film room with Jim Chaney and Jim hitting pause and say, what do you see? What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. And Jared rattling off all the right answers. And the problem is he just can't process that information when he's under center and the live bullets are flying. So I think we've seen enough sample size now to know that's a switch that is not getting flipped. He just doesn't have the feel.
So what's the question is, what is Jim Chaney's answer to that?
Well, I think
because Brian Bauer's not ready to do that either.
No, and that's why it's got to be the check with me. It's got to be way more stuff that simplifying the reads. Offense is calling the stuff from the sidelines. Pruitt went up there on Monday and said, Fromm was a guy who he's never seen, maybe ever, as good at managing the game. Well, with this offense, we have four game sample size of knowing that Garantano is not that. So they during the bye week, they better have found at least some sort of remedy for at least the pre-snap errors that are happening.
Yeah, the quarterback gets too much credit, too much blame. He also gets all the conversation. So we'll talk about the Tennessee defense and what they've got to do on Friday in this matchup with Georgia. Let's quickly jump to recruiting. Austin, you were talking about the Whitehaven situation and maybe Tennessee going all in there. They went a step further than even I think we thought they were going to go in our Friday podcast when we discussed this situation. Tennessee offers all three of those guys now. What does that mean for Tennessee's hopes of landing the trio out of Whitehaven and maybe the help with Omari Thomas there as well?
Well, I think that they all three want to play together. There's no doubt about that. In fact, I think they all three had a conversation Friday night after Tamarion got the offer from Tennessee, and obviously he's committed to Mississippi State. French is committed to Arkansas. But I do think that Tennessee will be a major player for all three, and I think the fact that Jeremy Pruitt was the first head coach to come to one of their games this year made a huge impression on them, and I think Tennessee's going all in there. Obviously, I think those guys know Omari Thomas, especially Bryson Eason. I think that does help them there as well. Jeremy Pruitt spent the first half at Whitehaven and then went to Briarcrest. Before the game, he was over in West Memphis, Arkansas, seeing Chris Morris. So this is definitely a situation where Jeremy Pruitt and them have, I think, turned, I won't say all their attention, but a good portion of their attention to in-state players. Because I think when you look at the if you can hold on to what you have, and then, you add the in-state crop of 4-star Jay Hardy, 4-star Tyler Barron, 3 kids at Whitehaven are 4 stars. Not that stars matter. I'm just saying quality people. And then obviously Omari Thomas and Chris Morris. You start rounding out your class, in pretty successful fashion. Then Tennessee's got to find another running back in this class. Probably looking the JUCO route to do that. And then they're going to continue to fill in the receivers.
Let me ask you this about is the Whitehaven Trio, is that a situation where Tennessee individually likes them better than they did back in the summer, or is this a situation where they're like, look, we're going to have a hard time landing big fish around the country. Let's take the trio. They're okay, and maybe that trio will land us Omari Thomas.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think it's just like, well, we have to take them because we can't get these other big-time guys. I think it's, every year, a year ago, they looked at some kids' film and they're like, oh, he's really playing well, or oh, he's not that good. Early, first 4 or 5 games of senior year. I think that they looked this year, and French is playing better than they saw him play a year ago. Piqued interest, and then Pruitt watched Tamarion play Friday night and was like, whoa, this is a kid we could play in multiple spots. And
now that I will, and I said this on the podcast on Friday when talking about Tamarion. With my naked eyes, I thought he was the best high school player of the three. how does that translate to the next level? I do think there's still some questions there because he is kind of a tweener.
Yeah, whereas the other two are just big.
Yeah, and so, but if, Tennessee staff now, I think it helps that he's teammates with two other guys that they want, or teammates with another guy that they want.
And then there's
but
another
hey,
lineman
this kind of goes to my Reggie Grimes argument that this football team, as currently constructed, just doesn't have enough dudes that can run down the field and hit people. So, if you're using one of those 25 spots for that, if they can become a special teams weapon that plays 10 snaps on defense, that pays for itself. Like that, you know what I'm saying? Like in a scholarship, that may sound like small potatoes, but in terms of what you're getting out of some other guys that are currently on the roster, even some guys that perhaps you've signed, it's a gamble worth taking.
And the other thing is just development. Look at Justin Coleman. That guy has morphed into the best nickel in the NFL. And when he was here, he routinely got beat. He self-driven, motivated, coached up once he got in the league, and has kind of realized some potential. Who's to say that some of these high school kids can't do the same thing here with this staff? So, in my mind, I think you can't sign 25 from this state. But with the situation they're in and the guys that are on the board, they could still land out of this state. You're crazy not to go after all of them and try to, get as many as you can. Grimes is another perfect example.
How much of this is a bit, and 1 and 3 changes it? Okay, if they were 3 and 1, they'd be still talking about West Coast kids. Although we saw Savell Smalls, that was never going to happen. Tennessee would be 3 and 1 right now, 4 and 0 right now. He ain't coming to. He's not coming to the southeast.
Well, as Jesse pointed out before the podcast started, Washington wasn't even in the top 6.
Right.
3 weeks ago.
Right. So ultimately, that kid was not leaving the West Coast, which we know that's not the easiest thing to do. My question is, how much of this is a learning experience from last year? Because they did try to swing back around on Joseph Anderson too late, and they had ignored him for such a long period of time.
Should be a learning experience.
But how much is it a learning experience?
I think it's a big one. I think that's why you can't wait. If you have any kind of inkling that you should go down that road, you should go ahead and go down that road, because what makes I guess what Tamarion, Mississippi State's and probably a little better. Arkansas is I know they played Texas A&M tough Saturday, but they're equally as big a dumpster fire as Tennessee is. That's, to me, you have to do that. You have to learn from what you did a year ago. You look up and Savion Williams is and Darrell looks great coming off the bus, but don't you wish you had Joseph Anderson instead of one of those two guys? I personally think Joseph Anderson's a guy that will end up being a really good player for South Carolina, and he's going to be there for 4 years. You're going to have these other guys for 2.
All right, let's go to visits this weekend. Reggie Graham's supposed to be here for his official. What else are we looking at? I know it's early in the week. We have much more on Friday, but what else are we looking at?
Trying to get that old Memphis crew here.
Yeah, well, Whitehaven's off this week because they couldn't find an 10th game. So this is not their bye week, but it ends up being a bye week. So they're trying to get that whole crew here, which includes Omari Thomas. Omari was going to come officially, but then they've said, "Hey, let's hold off and come officially later."
Right. So trying to get a lot.
Bryson Eason told me Sunday night he will officially visit Tennessee later in the year.
But they're trying to get him here unofficially.
They're trying to get him unofficially here this weekend, along with all 3 of those kids. I don't think Chris Morris comes in this weekend. Maybe. I think it's more likely that he comes in for the South Carolina game. He will visit Texas A&M officially next week when Tennessee plays Mississippi State. A&M plays Bama, and then I think probably late October, early November for a decision for Chris Morris, based off what I was told last night.
All right, so we'll see who comes in this weekend on the football front. Rob, on the basketball front, everybody knows who's coming in. Big weekend for Tennessee. Opportunities for Tennessee fans to see this basketball team on Friday night, and they'll have some recruits in the house watching that one as well. It's a big weekend for this basketball program.
Huge. Jaden Springer, the guy they've been chasing since his freshman year. Making his official visit this weekend. It's the last one. He visited Michigan early, visited Memphis, canceled 2 other trips, North Carolina and Florida. A lot of people, including myself, think Tennessee's the team to beat. And I think a good visit this weekend. I think they lock it down, and I think good chance you hear something pretty quickly. They're bringing in the 2 other commitments, Corey Walker, Keon Johnson, so all those guys can spend time together. they already have a relationship. They talk. They've got a little group chat thing going. They've been talking about playing together, and I think barring a surprise, I think Tennessee's going to end up with their third top 30 commitment in the 2020 class, which is going to be pretty remarkable if it happens. Now, crazy things happen in recruiting, but right now I think Tennessee's in really good shape.
And as for this current team, they continue to wait on Euros on news there, but you had some stuff in the war room about this team, and it seems like Rick Barnes likes the mentality of this team. I don't know if he likes the full makeup of all the parts that he has. Does he have enough size, all those things? But from a mentality standpoint, the carryover from what those guys who left sort of created here seems to be there, thanks to Bowden and Lamonte Turner.
Loves the work ethic, loves the attitude, and I think the attitude, starts with Bowden and Turner, but it also gets reflected in the kind of kids they recruit. Rick isn't bringing in guys at this stage of his career that he's not going to enjoy coaching, and if he does make a mistake, they don't stay long. We've seen we've seen a lot of guys roll in and out of here, and I think I've said a lot. I think people around this program quietly think this team's going to be a lot better than they're going to be perceived to be from the outside. They're not going to be ranked number one for a month, but I think they're going to be highly competitive in the SEC. I think they'll be ranked, and I think it'll be a fun season.
It will depend on what they get out of the post play. We'll have much more on Tennessee basketball. Obviously, recruiting big this weekend. First chance to see them a little bit on Friday, and then plenty of coverage with basketball coming up in the coming weeks as well. As won't be long before they'll tip that off into exhibition play and scrimmage action and all those things. But for now, it's Tennessee and Georgia, and the Volunteers with an uphill battle to try to pull off an upset in Neyland Stadium. We'll continue to cover that throughout the week, and we'll talk to you again Friday on our Friday edition of the podcast. But that's going to do it for the Tuesday installment. For Jesse Simonton, Austin Price, and Rob Lewis, I'm Brett Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.